going to talk about the simple present tense and how to use it in daily conversation to talk about habitual and common activities. The simple present describes activities that have happened in the past, that are happening in the now, as in right now, or that will happen in the future. These activities are daily habits or routines that people engage in, usually every day in their lives. For example, Anne combs her hair every day. This is a part of her daily routine. Getting ready in the morning, she gets out of the shower, takes out her comb, and brushes her hair every day. Or, you can also use the simple present to describe how you get to work. I could say, I drive to work every day. This is something that I usually do. It's very common for me to go to work every day by driving my car. These activities are usually something that happen every day or describe a daily habit. The simple present can also be used to state a general fact about someone or to state a scientific fact that always happens and that always will happen. For example, babies cry. This is a general fact. We've all seen it happen. Babies cry to tell their parents that they want or need something. Also, a scientific fact, birds fly. If we look out the window, I'm sure we could find 3 or 5 birds flying around. This has happened throughout time, and it will continue to happen into the future. To form a statement using the simple present, it is very easy, especially when you're talking about first and second person pronouns, like I, you, we, and they. There is no need to do anything to the verb in the sentence. It stays in its base form. For example, you can say, I work at the grocery store. And you can see this woman is bagging up groceries, and there is no need, and she just says, I work at the grocery store. There is no need to do anything to the verb. You can also say, when you're speaking to someone else, you work at the grocery store. As you can see, this person is speaking to this grocery store worker. He says, you work at the grocery store, and he responds, I do. You can also say, when you're speaking about a group of people, that they, here, work at the grocery store. You can also say, when you're speaking of yourself and of a coworker, that we work at the grocery store. You can see from these examples that the verb work stayed in its base form, and there is no need to change it. To use the simple present in the third person with pronouns like he, she, or it, all you have to do is add an S to the base form of the word. As you can see here, he works, she works, or it works. Here in this picture, you can say that he, the man, drives to work. You can see the S is added to the main verb drive. You can also say, she drives to work. You cannot say, she drive to work. It just doesn't sound right in English, so you need to add the S to the verb. You can also say, talking about an object, it, meaning the car, drives great. You can see the S there again. You can also use the simple present to make negative statements, to state that something does not happen every day, or that something is not a scientific fact. To do this, it is quite simple, especially in the first and second person. As you can see here, all you need to do is add a do helping verb plus the negate ter not. You can say, I do not work, or you do not work, or we do not work, or they do not work. Also, you should note that the base form of the verb does not change as well in these statements. Because you have the do and not helping the verb, there is no need to do anything to the verb. So in this picture, this man is saying, I do not work at a restaurant. You can see he has a wrench, and overall he looks like he is some sort of a mechanic. He does not work in a restaurant. When you're speaking to someone else and maybe expressing something about them, you can say, for example, you do not work in a restaurant, like this chef is saying to this grocer up here. He is stating a fact about a daily action that the man in the picture does not work at a restaurant. You can also say, when you're speaking of you and someone else, that we do not work in a restaurant, for example. You can see in this picture they're working in an office. They're clearly not in a restaurant, so they are saying, we do not work in a restaurant. Lastly, you can say that they, people over there, or here in this picture, do not work in a restaurant. Though these people are in a restaurant and having dinner at a restaurant, they are not working. So you would say they do not work in a restaurant. To make a negative statement in the third person using pronouns he, she, and it, it's a little different than using the first or second person pronouns, but only slightly. As you can see here, you, instead of using the helping verb do with not to make a negative statement, you use the helping verb does to make a negative statement. So you can say, he does not work, or she does not work, or it does not work. You can see here, or speaking of this man in the picture, you can say, he does not work at a grocery store. And this is true. He's sitting at a desk, working on a computer. He is not in a grocery store. He does not work in a grocery store. You can also say about this picture, she does not work in a restaurant. You can see her here, she's bagging up groceries. She clearly works in a grocery store. She does not work in a restaurant. Lastly, you can see this car, the car, it does not work. It's broken down, there's grass and flowers growing around it, it's rusty, it probably doesn't run anymore, so you would say the car does not work. When you want to find out more information about someone or someone's daily habits, using the simple present, it is very easy to form questions. For the first or second person, you put do before the personal pronoun. And also, again, there is no need to change the verb when asking simple present questions. The verb stays in its base form. So you can ask, if you're thinking to yourself and asking yourself a question, you could say, do I work tomorrow at 12 p.m.? Though this is not all that common, it is something that people think about. Or you could also say, when you're speaking to a friend, do we work tomorrow at 8 a.m.? Maybe you're checking your schedules, making sure you know when you work. This is when you would use this question. Or when you're at the grocery store and maybe are trying to find a clerk to help you find an item, you could say, hey, do you work at the grocery store? And hopefully the clerk will say, yes, I do. Lastly, if you're asking about what a group of people do for a living, or what some of your friends do, you could say, do they work at a restaurant or anywhere else? You can see this woman is on the phone to a friend and asking what these men do for a living. She says, do they work at a restaurant? But clearly they do not. As you can see with these questions, the verb work does not change, and it stays in its infinitive form. To ask a question in the third person using the simple present tense, instead of using the helping verb do, you use the helping verb does with the pronouns he, she, and it. You can ask, does he work? Does she work? Or does it work? Maybe you're asking, does a computer work? Or does the car work? Remember, keep in mind, when you're asking questions, you want to raise your tone on the last word of the question. And in writing, you need to use a question mark, as you can see here. It lets the listener or reader know that you're asking a question. Otherwise, they might not understand what you are saying. So, if we were to ask a question about this picture, we would ask, does he drive to work? And clearly from the picture, he does. He's in a car, he's dressed up in business clothes. It looks like he's going to work. About this picture, you might ask, does she work at a restaurant? Although clearly she does not. She's at a cash register, there's some groceries on a conveyor belt. It looks like she works at a grocery store, but you still might ask, does she work at a restaurant? Also, please note that the verb work stays in its infinitive form as well in these questions. Lastly, when you're asking about an object, you could say, like a car, you could say, does the car work? Although from this picture, it looks like it doesn't because it is being towed away. To answer questions using the simple present tense, you can simply say either yes or no. But in English, yes and no are typically followed by a simple present positive statement or negative statement. For example, if I ask, does this man in the picture drive to work, or does he drive to work? And it's clear that he does drive to work. I would say, yes, he drives to work. Using the simple present statement form that we learned earlier, you can see that you need to add an S to the base form of the verb to form a simple present statement. To answer a simple present question using a negative simple present statement, you do need to use a do or does helping verb. So, to this picture, I might ask, does she work at a restaurant? And the answer would be clearly, no, she does not work at a restaurant. You can see, though, that the base form of the verb stays in the infinitive and nothing changes to the verb because we have the helping does and not in front of it. I hope you enjoyed this lesson on how to use the simple present tense in daily conversation. Thank you for watching.